and welcome to another episode of the program Healthy Living. I'm Aisha Salihu. Many people living with chronic illnesses may agree with a common statement that our illnesses do not define us, as they can still live a meaningful and fulfilling life. On this edition, we're looking at the sickle cell disease, which is a group of blood disorders typically inherited from a person's parents. The most common type is known as sickle cell anemia. It results in an abnormality in the oxygen-carrying protein, hemoglobin, found in the red blood cells. Dr. Ikaite David, a hematologist, and Shehu Olaita Mohammed, a sickle cell anemia survivor, respectively, gives us more insights on the blood disease. There's been so much buzz about the sickle cell disease. I'd like to know in layman's term what the sickle cell disease is.
So sickle cell disease is an inherited disorder. So when we talk about inherited disorder, it means that it's the parents that transmit it to the children. So sickle cell disease usually arises when a couple both have AS genotype. So the studies show, or science shows, that if a male is AS and a female is AS, in every pregnancy there's a 25% chance that the child will be born with sickle cell.
How is the disease diagnosed?
Okay, so sickle cell disease is diagnosed by testing. So usually children who are born, they don't start to show symptoms till about 6 to 9 months. So when they're about 6 to 9 months, sometimes they begin to show some symptoms that would make the doctor suspect they may have sickle cell disease. But the good thing about it is that now in Nigeria, there's something called the newborn screening program that has started in certain centers. So what happens is that when a child is born, in addition to other tests, one of the tests that will be done is something called newborn screening. So it's possible for the parents to know from birth, when a newborn screening is done, the child's genotype.
What are the symptoms of the sickle cell disease?
Okay, so commonly, the commonest symptom is pain, known as Vaso-Occlusive Crisis. So the children come down with a lot of pain, they are crying, they are uncomfortable. So apart from the pain, you have things called aplastic crisis, you have hyperhemolytic crisis, and sequestration crisis. Those are the different crises they have. And then sometimes they have complications. And so what happens is that due to the recurrent sickling, this recurrent sickling leads to damage of different organs in the body. So you have damage to the eyes, damage to lungs, damage to bones, damage to the kidney, and different organs of the body generally can be affected by the sickle cell disease.
Does the sickle cell disease come in types or forms? I'd like to know very quickly.
Okay, so there are two different, so there's something called the sickle cell disease and there's something called sickle cell anemia. So what happens is that there are different types of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the protein that carries the oxygen around. So we have the ones we know commonly, the A, the S. So we have other abnormal forms apart from the S. So we have things like C, like D, and things like that. So when a child or when somebody inherits two abnormal sickle cells, the person is said to have sickle cell anemia, or the SS. But when the person has two abnormal cells, an S and another one, then we say the person has a sickle cell disease. So there are people that have SC, SD, and things like that.
Do you think the disease is more common now?
I'm not sure it's common now. I think what has changed is the awareness. There's more awareness, TV programs, TV interviews, TV jingles. So it's said that the S gene arose in the malaria belt. And so for us, the malaria belt includes Africa, some parts of the Mediterranean, some parts of India, some parts of the Arab area, and then some parts of Europe, in Italy, sections of Italy in Europe. So there's the region. So it was said to have arisen because it gave some protection against malaria. That's how the S is said to have developed. But, so if you have one S, you function normally. But the problem arises when people have two S. So usually there's a lot of talk on intending couples who are getting married to know their genotype, and it's discouraged for couples who both have AS genotype from getting married, simply because there's a risk of giving birth to children who have SS.
At what age or stage does a crisis start? You did talk about crisis.
Yes, so like I said, from somewhere between 6 to 9 months of age, when they are quite young, and it goes on most times throughout life. But the thing about sickle cell is that the presentations vary in different people who have the disease. So it's difficult to say, but for most people, 6 to 9 months and goes on throughout life.
So what then are the variations of the disease?
Okay, so some people have like I said, the commonest is the bone pain or the vaso-occlusive crisis. So the main variation is that some people will have it quite frequently and other people will have it rarely. Some people will come down with some complications of the disease in their lifetime and others will not.
Okay, we mentioned, in the course of the interview, we mentioned malaria and sickle cell. Just very quickly expatiate on that.
I said the S gene is said to have is protective against malaria, but that's when it is with a normal A gene. So it said that those who have AS have some form of protection from malaria. It's not absolute, but there's some form of protection. But of course, those who have the abnormal genes lose that protection.
So the sickle cell disease, does it shorten one's lifespan?
Okay, so unfortunately, when there's no adequate medical care and all that, yes, it does shorten one's lifespan. So as it said, in Africa, there's statistics that quite a number of them die before their 5th birthday. But for those who have access to care and proper medical attention and who actually take care of themselves, they live a normal lifespan. So, for example, we have patients who are in their 50s. But like I said, they have to have access to care as and when needed.
How does this disease affect a child's development?
Okay, so for some of them, because they are frequently ill, they have loads of missing school days. And then, of course, because there are certain games and sports and stuff like that that they are unable to do because such things would aggravate pain in them. So it would generally affect the quality of life, their daily living, what we call the daily living. So sometimes you see children are unable to do the sort of sports they would have liked to do because that would trigger a pain crisis. Also sometimes because they are in and out of the hospital, they are missing school days, so that also affects them.
Coping with it has to do with being very vigilant on my health, my crisis triggers, what triggers my crisis, what I should do, what I should not do, what medications I'm to take. All these things are the things I make sure that strictly I keep on to. But then, you know what, for us sickle cell patients, sometimes no matter how vigilant you are, no matter how meticulous you are in taking care of yourself, ensuring that you keep to the do's and don'ts, you still fall sick. So it's now important for you to ask yourself, how best do I treat myself? Which medical facilities do I use? That would be very good for me, where I can get good attention. From my own experience, I always prefer the tertiary hospitals. Maybe in Abuja here, I always tell people that, look, anytime I'm in there, I prefer going to the national hospital. The reason that instead of it's not as if I want to demarket the private hospitals. All these governments, you find that you have many specialists that can attend to you. You know, sickle cell it's sometimes it's referred to as multi-system disorder, but you find out that it does not affect particular part of your body alone. Any part of it could be affected. So in that situation, when you are in a tertiary hospital, it is likely you have access to other specialists instead of one doctor in a particular area treating you in all these small hospitals. So that has been one area that me personally, I ensure that I do. Can we really say that one can describe the extent of the pain? Because you say for us, sickle cell patients, there's already this thing they say of us that we have high threshold of pain. What any other person will take as pain, for us we won't even take it as pain because we have been so used to those pains. I remember a friend, a female friend, telling me that, look, the pain of sickle cell crisis is much more than what a woman goes through during labor. So you can now imagine how traumatic that pain could be. That is why we are exposed to so many pain relieving drugs. Some of them are opioid drugs, injections, and of course they do work for us. But sometimes you now find that it creates another problem for us, this drug dependency. But the issue of the pain is honestly very difficult to explain because it is you that you find that you see someone in his 40s, 50s crying like a baby when that pains really come, and all the people around, there's virtually nothing you can do about it other than seeking the medical help and the doctors doing all they could to reduce the pains. And they now have to give us those higher doses of those pain relievers, which sometimes, like I said, could be something that we now be depending on. So that's one of the tragedy that goes with our treatment.
You're still watching Healthy Living on Trust TV. Let's go on a quick break. We'll be right back. According to the World Health Organization, approximately 5% of the world's population carries trait genes of hemoglobin disorders, mainly sickle cell disease and thalassemia. Also, according to the global health body, more than 300,000 babies with severe hemoglobin disorders are born globally each year, but 75% is said to be found in sub-Saharan Africa. The medical condition occurs relatively frequently in parts of India, the Arabian Peninsula, and among people of African origin living in other parts of the world. What about the physical attributes of a child?
Okay, so it's not in all patients. There's some you would see and you won't even know they have the sickle cell, but some of them may have small stature, So they are shorter than, they have some delayed developmental features. So some of them are short, some of them they have what is called busting of the skull. So their head bones appear a bit more prominent, but those things are not specific across board. It's just a few people.
What then is a long-term outlook for a child with a sickle cell anemia?
Okay, so like I said, for a child who has access to adequate and prompt medical attention, they can there's a good outlook for them because they can have a normal lifespan.
Okay, the sickle cell anemia, is it gender-based? What gender is more likely to have this disease?
No, it can affect, like I said, it's a genetic inherited disease, so it can affect both males and females.
What other medical problems does the sickle cell anemia or disease predispose a patient to?
Okay, so like I had mentioned earlier that there are some organs it can damage. So it can damage the kidney and predispose them to having some kidney problems. It can damage the bones and predispose them to having bone issues. So they would need, so depending on the organ it damages, they would then need further treatments in that area.
So we've been talking basically about sickle cell disease and anemia, the types, the symptoms, the causes. What are the complications of the disease?
So like I said, access to medical care. So if usually we would advise our patients who have sickle cell disease to look for a hematologist and register and attend clinics and follow-ups, because by doing those, they are able to pick whatever complications may arise. First, they can pick them up early, and then secondly, they can give them attention. So that helps.
Let's talk about signs of complicated cases.
Okay, so for example, there's something called avascular necrosis of the bone. So for them, they start to complain about pain in the hips, and then you'll notice some people after a while, the pain gets really bad, and if it doesn't have, if it's not quickly sorted out, they start to walk with a limp. Some of them may have bone infections known as osteomyelitis, and then some of them may have something called leg ulcers. So they have wounds on their ankle joints that don't heal properly, and that would need to be sorted out medically.
So what are the management techniques and treatment of the sickle cell disease and anemia?
Okay, so basically for management techniques and treatments, for the cure of sickle cell, there are two major things: bone marrow transplant and gene therapy. Gene therapy is still ongoing, research ongoing and all that, but it's been used in France to cure someone with sickle cell. But bone marrow transplant has been there and it's been known to help. And luckily, there's a bone marrow transplant center in Nigeria, in Benin. So those two procedures would cure sickle cell disease. On the other hand, we also have medications that help to alleviate the symptoms like the pain and all that. For a long time, it was just only one drug, hydroxyurea. But in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a lot of research, and now there are other drugs coming in, L-glutamine, voxelotor, crenalizumab, which is the new one that was just approved for use in the UK. The NHS had been approved in the US and was being used, but it's recently been approved in the UK and is now being used for patients.
So talking about the treatment of the disease, you mentioned the first new treatment. So let's beam our spotlight on that. Let's elaborate the new treatment that has been discovered and recommended in the UK and the US.
Okay, so crenalizumab, it's a monoclonal antibody. It's a p-selectin inhibitor. So what it does is it's going to prevent, it's usually what p-selectin would do would be to attach to its ligand and cause release of substances. So what this crenalizumab does is it prevents p-selectin attaching to the p-selectin binding protein, and then therefore helps, what the drug is supposed to do is reduce vaso-occlusive crisis. like I said, if you remember earlier when you were asking me questions, I said the commonest presentation for sickle cell disease patients is vaso-occlusive crisis. And that's the commonest presentation in accident and emergencies and all that. So if you are able to reduce the number of times they have pain, you are able to improve their quality of life. Because like you and I would know, we don't have that kind of severe pain. But anytime we have pain, we know we are not able to function properly. So what the drug is supposed to do is reduce the frequency of vaso-occlusive crisis. It's not a cure. Like I've mentioned, there are two cures, the bone marrow transplant and gene therapy. But all these are drugs to help manage presentations in the sickle cell disease. The drug, usually before drugs are put into the market, they usually go through clinical trials. So clinical trials were done for this drug in Africa. So some were done in Kenya and Ghana, and 1 or 2 centers in Nigeria as well. So it's based on these results that the drugs are then approved, found to be safe for use in people. The thing is that the drug has only been approved for those who are over 16 years of age. So those under 16 years, for now, we don't have the literature for them. And so it's not going to be used for them. It's just going to be used for those who are age 16 years and above. And so most likely through the clinical trials and things like that. But in terms of getting it, so the drug is expensive. So to get it across, for it to be used, we would need government policies, government interventions, help by NGOs and things like that to get it readily available to the population that would need it. No, it's still prevalent. It's not as if it has reduced, but like I said, the awareness is more. So people know. You were asking how come, people seem to, is it just recently developed? And I said no, that the only difference is that there's more awareness now. So what we need to do is continue to create the awareness, but we now have to go a step further and move it from the urban areas and also move that awareness to the rural areas, because the more people become aware of what to do, like intending couples and things like that, then we are sure that the rates will then become less, because if people know before they get married they should do genotype testing.
So lastly, as a hematologist, what advice would you give to patients living with a medical condition, sickle cell disease or anemia?
So as a hematologist, I would say, please make sure you get a hematologist near you, register, go for your clinic appointments and get yourself checked so that problems are picked up early. Because when problems are picked up early, they can be sorted out.
To those suffering from the sickle cell anemia disease, know that this is not a death sentence. As Dr. Ikaito David, the hematologist, and Shehu Olaito Mohammed, the brave sickle cell survivor, have said, strict adherence to the medical routine and a positive attitude to life are one of the remedies to living a normal life and fulfilled one. On this note, we have come to the end of this edition of Healthy Living. Always remember that he who has health has hope, and he who has hope has everything. I'm Aisha Salihu. Thank you for watching.